Hey everybody, Steve Cady here at Bowling Green State University with Nexus for Change with our Change 2024-2025, but really 2024 Think Tank series with the Academy of Management OD&C division, who is sponsoring and being a part of this project with us. We're really glad to have you all here. We have a doctoral program and a master's program at Bowling Green State University. Several of our students are here. We even have someone who was one of the first people in our master's program to be here with us today, and some people that have been a part of our doctoral program and are coming in. So it's really cool. And our doctoral program is for working adults, people from all over the world come into the program that are learning how to transform organizations, revitalize communities, and develop human potential, all built on this notion of thought leadership, building our thought leadership brand around the thing we're passionate about bringing into the world, which gives us opportunities to do more of those things that we want to do in the world, which brings us professional joy. And I think that's really important, is to do meaningful work, and particularly in this day and age with the human-centered work that we do. The focus of the series is on human-centered change. And we have three friends of mine, really good friends of mine, that are here today. So I'm really glad that you all are here. I'll do an introduction of each of you when we bring each of you up. The way we'll do it is we'll do a brief introduction to each person. They'll share for about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll pause, reflect a little bit, and then go to the next person, pause, reflect a little bit, and then go, and then be done with our three people. We will then go to breakouts, and you all will have a chance to digest and look at connections amongst the three. And then once you find that connections amongst three and kind of come back with some questions, we'll come back and we have more time for conversation. The reason this is 90 minutes is to allow for that integrative, thoughtful conversation. So with that, we'll jump in. And our first person is one of my dear friends and mentors in life, is Don Warrick. Don and I have had the pleasure of now writing a few things together, which I'm really glad about. We wrote recently about tsunami change, using the concept of tsunami and the science behind it to really understand what's going on in organizations around change. Don has been a great friend of our program. Don, you have shared with our students your wealth of knowledge and your history, historical knowledge of the field, where it's gone, really listening to and tapping into people. You're such a talented, inquisitive person. You really get into people thinking, and I know you'll be sharing some of that inquisitiveness with us today with the gentleman that you'll be highlighting some of the lessons today. But Don has really also just been a spiritual mentor to me in ways as well, which I'm very grateful for, helping me to keep my feet on the ground. So I'm grateful for that, Don. Don, why don't you share with us your thoughts for the day?
Yeah, what a kind introduction. And if you would, Steve, show the handout actually that I prepared for everybody. So I imagine Steve could send this to you if you like. And I also have an article that I'm sending out for publication that you can get on this subject. So the subject is Transforming Organizations, Valuable Insights from Interviews with Former CEO of Ford Motor Company, Alan Allen. So here's what I did and what I want to share with you. Alan Mulally, you probably know, some consider him the CEO that performed the greatest turnaround of a major company in the U.S. in U.S. history. He has been named one of the top CEOs ever in the world. All kinds of articles, books, documentaries have been provided about Alan, especially about his leadership and building culture. But nothing was ever really done about how he specifically transformed Ford Motor Company. Um, and and so what I've been doing is I've had a friendship with Alan now for about maybe 4 years or so. And in fact, he wrote the foreword to my latest book. And I've just been soaking in what he did and through a lens of organization development. So I think I framed it in a way that maybe even was interesting to him in a way, and that I don't know that he always understood fully what he was doing, but he just did so many things right. So what I've put together for you is 11 things that he has actually done. Now, I'm just going to scratch the surface today. So if you're really interested in this, ask Steve for that article because it goes into details with examples of each of the 11 things. Now, I will say there are a few themes that you're going to see in here. One is the power of working together when people have a compelling and understandable and clear vision, mission, and expected behaviors. The second one is thinking in terms of the good of all stakeholders. So one of the things Alan did was he focused not just on himself, the leaders, employees, but customers, suppliers, everybody who was a stakeholder and got everyone in the company to think in those terms. Third, and this is a major contribution, I think, is the importance of character in transformational change. We know about the importance of leadership skills and knowledge and that sort of thing. But what we don't really know a lot about is the impact that character actually has on transforming organizations, and that who you are is as important as what you do. And the last theme is the integration of what we do in OD to manage change and what we know about transforming organizations with the literature on transformational leadership. And if you study that, they did such a wonderful job of talking about leadership, but they really didn't have much to present on managing change or transforming organizations. And Alan was able to put all these into play. So here goes. So here's the first one. Diligently assess present realities and future possibilities and listen and build relationships at all levels. Now, this is an OD kind of theme that a lot of leaders don't think about, but Alan was especially good at being a student of Ford before he even took over the leadership, and especially after he became the CEO. But he talked to board members, to the leaders, to employees, to customers, to dealers. He went everywhere trying to become a student of Ford and what was working and what was not working. He also understood the importance of building relationships as a foundation for launching transformation. So he went around to the world to all the facilities of Ford. He did invite dealers in to talk to and all kinds of people that he needed support from. And so he was building this strong foundation, because when he came in, there was a lot of skepticism about having a former CEO, by the way, of Boeing, which he was, building airplanes, now building automobiles. And he genuinely practiced in this building relationships the many things that he learned from his parents about love, about humility, about service, and just who he was made it possible to quickly build trusting relationships. Number two, lead the way with a passion for excellence that is contagious. When leaders lead, great things are possible. Good management is important. And certainly Alan built a well-managed Ford from one that was just literally in chaos, about to go under. It was literally months away from bankruptcy when he took over. They had just lost $17 billion. So he had to do a lot of managing. But he believes that you can't manage an organization to greatness. You can only lead it to greatness. So he paid a lot of attention to his leaders and coaching them, mentoring them, what he expected of a good leader, and teaching them that leadership is an honorable profession, but it has a lot of responsibility that goes with it. And he believes that you can't delegate responsibility for leading transformational change. In other words, you can delegate a lot of things, but you've got to lead the way if you're going to transform an organization. And he fully understood that character was a critical part of this. And he made sure that his leaders looked in the mirror to see what they stood for, what their beliefs, values were, their vision for Ford, and so on. So the next one, though, then kind of multiplies this idea of the importance of leadership. And by the way, in OD, we understand that. No matter what we do, it's not going to matter if the leaders don't lead. We need their support in what we do. So he was an expert leader, a great role model, but also a teacher of his leadership team. And by the way, he gained their confidence very quickly by guaranteeing that he would not get rid of a single top level leader at Ford if they were committed to the vision that he had for Ford. So number 3 is he developed a principled, skilled, and united leadership team working together to transform the organization. When leaders lead and are united, even greater things are possible. So when leaders lead, great things are possible. But you've really got a powerful combination for change if you can get the leadership team to be united, working together, being an example. And this was a challenging task because the Ford leaders were scattered all over the world. They all kind of led their own fiefdoms. They didn't work together. They didn't even particularly like each other, were fairly dysfunctional as a team. And so he had quite a challenge to pull them together. So what he did, he got rid of lots of meetings that they had that were pretty meaningless and had one meeting every week that all of the top 15 leaders across the world were expected to be at. And in that meeting, they all had to share what their part of the organization was doing to accomplish the new vision that he had for Ford. And so they got to know each other. They learned to work together through this. And to get them to work together, he used a little system he called red light, yellow light, green light. You may have heard this. So when you gave your presentation to the rest of the group about what was going on in your part of the organization, if everything was going well, you said green light. If you had a few problems, yellow light. If you needed some help, you said red. Well, for about a month, all the lights were green. And then Alan said, for a company that just lost $17 billion, this doesn't sound right. And so finally, he got a few people to begin to say, well, yeah, maybe I have a yellow light, and then finally red lights. And at that point, they became a united leadership team collaborating together. And he taught them when any one of them had an issue, we'd get together and share the wisdom to help one another out. Then the next one is create a compelling vision and strategy for winning that everyone can understand and embrace. Transforming a company the size of Ford with hundreds of thousands of employees is a daunting task. But he realized he needed something very simple to unite everybody and get everybody running in the same direction and on the same page. So he created a little calling card that he gave to all hundreds of thousands of employees. And on it, on the front, was the Ford vision. And here's what it was. This is how simple it was. One Ford with one team, one plan, and one goal. On the back, he listed the expected behaviors of all Ford employees. Foster functional and technical excellence, own working together, role model Ford values, and deliver results. And he went around the country, the world, and had his leaders do the same with this little card, talking to employees about how important all of those were. But now they had a common purpose, a common vision that was compelling to be able to work together for common goals that were crystal clear. And the center of all this concept was what he called working together. In fact, he'd like to use the term our, not my working together concept, but our working together concept. And he taught often how powerful it was when people worked together for compelling goals. And so everyone was taught that one of the cultural values that was strongest was we have to work together and collaborate to get things done. The fifth one, build a working together, positive, action-oriented culture designed for dynamic change. So what he did was to build a culture that was very clear, where we had open and candid communications, where we treated everyone with value and respect, and that was a non-negotiable, and where we were action oriented, not busy work oriented. And so we used terms like people first to put the focus on people. He used the term, working for all stakeholders, to realize, get everyone to think we're working not just for us as Ford, but everybody that we serve. He also used the term resilient, which interestingly, today's times has become very popular and common. But he prepared the organization that to turn this company around, we're going to have some tough and difficult times. But when we do, that's when we want to move together. And so as this culture began to take place, it showed up foremost, in his leadership team and then through the rest of the organization. And so what we had was the same team and the same company that had just lost $17 billion now became the most successful automobile company when he was there in the United States, and one of the most profitable in the world. Number 6, involve, engage, and empower people at all levels to make change and get things done. He understood that if everything is clear, our vision, our values, our goals, what's expected of you, then you could empower people to get things done. If you empower people without that, it just causes a lot of confusion. And so he emphasized in one of our essential values in OD of collaboration, that we've got to work together to get things done. And leaders need to involve and engage people at all levels in what's going on. Probably the best example of this was in his work with United Automobile workers, who were typically hostile towards Ford. And he went before them and said, we want to have an involved, engaged, collaborative environment. He said, I'm going to tell you the truth. Right now, we can't sustain the cost structure that we have. I need your help in putting together a structure that's going to work for all of us. And so they did start working with them. They became collaborative, and it ended up with a win-win situation for both the union and Ford. The 7th one is be transparent and truthful and use facts and data to drive change. So he made it clear with the board when he first came in, said, I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to tell people the truth about what's working, what's not working, what we need to do to be successful. And so he made a point of doing that so that people would trust what he said. He had a newsletter that he sent out, and he would elaborate on what's going well and what we need to celebrate, but he'd also tell them, we're really struggling here. We need ideas and so on. And so he was very transparent. He used data to drive change. So he collected data on what was working and not working, presented that to people. And he had a saying, we can't manage a secret. The data sets us free. Then 8, communicate, keep people informed, and create opportunities for safe and open communications. A lot of you have probably read Amy Edmondson's work about psychological safe work environments where people can be candid and truthful, and how critical that is in today's times. Leaders today who don't have environments where communication is safe are in a dangerous position, because they're going to not be aware of information they need to be successful at what they do. So Alan realized that was not only necessary on a personal level, but you've got to create opportunities for people to be straightforward and safe in being candid and truthful. So he had surveys, all kinds of group meetings where people could communicate because even if you're an open kind of person that people tend to be truthful with, they're also going to be a little bit guarded depending on your position in the organization. You realize that. So you not only have to be open personally, but you have to create opportunities for people to be open. Then the ninth one was, and you'll love this, take a systems approach to change, align everything to support the desired changes, remove barriers to change, and use reliable feedback mechanisms to monitor progress. I mean, this is right out of ODC course 100. Very basic, but it's something that not many leaders do, especially in transforming organizations. So how many leaders really think about how do we align everything so that they support one another, and that we align, for example, strategy and culture, and that we're always thinking about things from a systems perspective. If we change this, what's going to be the impact on our culture, on our employees, on our customers? And so he not only created that kind of thinking with his leaders, but built in feedback mechanisms to monitor what was indeed working and what was not working well. Number 10, we're almost there. Recognize that you get what you reward, value, and measure, and deserve what you tolerate. And so he was very good at setting up the reward systems to value the right behaviors and to make sure there was an alignment between what we were telling people to do and motivating them to do and what we valued and rewarded. And so he made sure that his leaders, for example, recognized people for their efforts, celebrated successes, created opportunities for employee development, and so on. But he had a zero tolerance when leaders treated people with disrespect, would not collaborate, would not work together for the common good of all stakeholders. And every once in a while, he did have a leader who did not meet his criteria. And when that was the case, he always gave them the option to be part of the team and work for the goals, the new goals of Ford, or he would help them find a place somewhere else where maybe they would be a better fit. So you deserve what you tolerate as well as you get what you reward. And last of all, deliver results, collaborate to address challenges and mistakes, and keep the momentum going. So obviously, at some point, you got to start delivering results if you're going to have any believability in transforming an organization. So he was very good at getting results and reporting it back to people, and that built a lot of pride in the new board. But he also made it very clear that when we have any issues at any part of the organization, that we work together and collaborate to be able to find solutions. And you've got to keep the momentum going. When we think about change in ODC, there's kind of a preparation stage, there's an implementation stage, and there's a transition or follow through stage. And he understood that. So he made sure that that momentum that he started didn't just end each time we achieved something, but he kept it going and going and going. Now, as a wrap up with all this, I'll read this to you. This is something that I wrote at the end of this article. Said Mullally understood the great power to accomplish great things that is released when organizations have leaders who lead, take excellent care of their people, create a working together culture, and have a compelling purpose that unites rather than divides people. Valued and appreciated employees in well-led and managed organizations that can be trusted to look out for their best interests are likely to perform far above the norm. And he was certainly proof of that. And one last caveat that I discovered in all of this, you have to tailor everything we do in ODC, and you know this, but particularly transforming an organization to the particular skills and values of the leaders leading the way and what an organization is willing to do. not everybody is an Alan Mulally. In fact, he handpicked his successor, and it didn't work out that well because you simply can't replace what some people can do. And so you have to be fairly flexible in tailoring things. So I think I will stop with that. But I have to tell you that working with Alan these last 4 years has probably been one of the most exciting, entertaining, uh, and valuable times in my own learning that I have ever had. Had a chance to have him involved in my books. We did some videos together and so on. But boy, what an opportunity I've been blessed with to be able to learn from Alan Mulally.
Yeah, thanks, Don. That's really thoughtful of you in terms of the, like I said, the grand inquisitiveness that you bring to things. I'm sure he's loved talking with you. And so what I'd love for everybody to do to prepare for our transition to our next speaker, I'd like to do something that's called the Chatterfall. Has anybody heard of Chatterfall? Which is just what's a reflection or a question, something that you have. Don't hit enter, but type it into the chat. But I'll tell you when to hit enter. And that's what creates the fall, kind of like a waterfall. So just a thought or a reflection, a question that you have regard to what you've heard. Take a second to do that. And as we get ready to transition to Yeshim, Don, what is the thing that most touched you about Alan? What has kind of touched you, like, really touched you at a heart level?
We so often, talk about the importance of knowledge. That's what your doctorate program is all about skills. But he believes characters may be more important than any of those. And so he chooses his leaders based on their character. He tries to develop principled leaders, uh, but he loves to say, who you are is as important as what you do.
Wow.
And I totally agree.
Yeah, that's so true. So let's go ahead on the count of three. One, two, three. Bank, hit enter. So I'd love to, that'll give you a chance to see a little bit of what people are thinking about Don as we come back together. And we're going to transition over to Yeshim. So if you could take a second and take a breath, everybody, and we get to hear from Yeshim. So I was in London with our doctoral students. We were at a session at the Tavistock Toynbee Studios. With Tavistock is one of the pioneers in the social and behavioral sciences around experiential learning, action research, and they do a great deal of work in Europe and all throughout the world, actually. And Yeshim was in a session. She was asking these questions, and she shared a couple stories. And I thought I was listening to somebody talking about from a novel or some type of book. That was like, oh my goodness, the things that Yeshim, the things that you've done, the places you've been from a child all the way up to today is could be an amazing movie, a thriller and a thoughtful, heart-provoking experience of a movie. It could be, I would think. You've done so many things, and what Yeshim has is she has this ability to walk into the most difficult situations in the world and bring peace. And it's not her, I guess, in a way, she might not say she doesn't bring peace, but she comes in and creates conditions where peace can come forth. And you do that with your presence. Our students love meeting you and getting to know you. So when they come over, they always say one of the highlights of their trip to Europe is getting to meet you. And I think that's directly related to how present you are with them, and then the stories and the principles and things that you share from your work around the world. And so I'm just really grateful that you're spending time with us today. So you want to share with us your thoughts today?
Thank you, Steve, after that amazing introduction. Really lovely to be here. I see so many people I know and so many people I don't know. So good morning to those over the other side of the Atlantic. I'm in London, and it is 4:30 here. It's lovely to be with you. So So we live in a time of deepening divisions where finding common ground is becoming more and more urgent than ever. And as this afternoon is about finding a human way, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that I experienced in the areas in the regions that I worked in, and some of the amazing things that I've seen. And I will talk about how we can implement those in our daily life, some lessons from war zones to our daily life. So I worked for many years with people in high-stake conflict regions such as Cyprus, Northern Ireland, South Africa, Bosnia, Colombia, Lebanon, and recently Central Asia, Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan. Some of these places are war zones, and some of these places are administered by seemingly working democracies, but they actually aren't. So they all have their own challenges. And during my work, I saw violence and suffering and deep divisions, as well as some amazing resilience and profound acts of humanity. So I've seen firsthand how some of the tools used to navigate extreme tensions in those regions, how they can teach us valuable lessons about resilience, adaptability, and practical problem solving. What's happening in those countries are often, sorry, I'll just start my timer. I forgot. Are often limited for us just to see it on the television or newspapers. But what happens there, from human nature point of view, is very relevant to ourselves, our families, and organizations we work in. So anyway, I've observed a lot of things, but what fascinated me, absolutely fascinated me most, was not what I saw, what I observed, but how those are, how the lessons I learned there were applicable to ourselves even. So they weren't really limited to war, but they apply everywhere. The same dynamics are there. And I just wondered, so if the situations are, if the psychology is the same, I wonder whether some of the lessons and some of the tools there can be used. So that's what I've been working on in the past years. So I'm now going to start a presentation. It's so I just want to first of all check that you can all see my screen. So I'm going to share a document.
Yep, we can see it.
Can see it? Okay. All right. You can still see it fully? Yeah, cool. Okay, great, great, great. So, just 1 second, yeah. So I chose the topic as handling deep divisions from othering to bridging. So there are many aspects to the destruction I have seen in high-stake conflict regions. For example, physical devastation, economic collapse, political instability, and things like of course, emotional, intergenerational emotional trauma. And of course, the biggest one of it is deep division. So I will not be talking about physical devastation, economic collapse. I will concentrate today on the deep divisions in the next sort of 10 minutes. I will first share some of the experiences and observations from the regions I worked in, followed by a radical, pragmatic, and to be, in my view, very compelling approach to understanding these divisions and bridging these divisions. I will offer some thoughts on how, the power of transforming some of the tools I saw into organizations to right at the end. So first of all, I want to start with the pillars of deep division. So there are, in my mind, there are 3 pillars of deep divisions. The first one, so actually before I go to the first one, this photo is taken from the barbed wire. The barbed wires you see is, I took this photo looking over the what we call buffer zone in Cyprus. Cyprus is an island between Turkey and North Africa and the Mediterranean. It's I think the second largest island, and it's divided. It's been like for 60 years, over 60 years, there's been conflict. Some parts were very bloodshed. And I did a project there. So this is one of a photograph from there. So the 3 pillars of deep divisions. The first one, starting with, is entrenched views. So entrenched views then bring rigid beliefs, bias reinforcement, and defensive rhetoric. So I'll explain what I mean by them. I worked in Cyprus. I led a project on this beautiful island which aimed to build a dialogue platform between the 2 communities. And they've been in war for 60 years in one way or another, and they're deeply divided, and we're trying to bring them together. And we did. I have to say the project went well, it was successful, and I'm not saying it's so successful because I'm bragging, but I'm saying that it's successful because about nearly 10 years on, they're still talking to each other. So this is something that we started back then. So by rigid beliefs, rigid beliefs is very common in divided society. So during my work, one of the biggest impediments to my work as dialogue builder was the opinions being very fixed and new information or perspective being resisted to, strong resistance to. And bias reinforcement, again, is a natural progression from rigid belief. So it's like step number 2, sometimes it's step number 1, but so people seek out information that reinforces existing views while ignoring opposing evidence. So in Cyprus, for example, communities I worked with often consume media sources that only reflect their own side's narrative. So they wouldn't read newspapers that the other quote unquote people read. And of course, then the very next step after that is the defensive rhetoric, because this is very much, and this is in Cyprus and all the other places I worked in, and you might actually relate to it from the countries that you live in as well, but this is very much used by politicians to manipulate the communities, using hostile language to dismiss calls for dialogue, or framing any opposition as a threat to the identity, to their ideological identity. So pillar number 2. So this is a photo from Northern Ireland. I took this photo at one of the points which separate the Irish Republican community from British Loyalist community. So these barriers are called peace walls, which are more than, I think, 33 kilometers throughout Northern Ireland. So you can see what a divided society. We're talking about a very divided geography here. So loyalty over dialogue is very strong in Northern Ireland. It outweighs individual reasoning. So and in other regions too, on both sides, people often prioritize loyalty to their political identities or religious identities over considering other perspectives. And then, so identity loyalty, and then of course, fear of betrayal is very widespread. It's a very common feature of all divided societies. Speaking against their own group risks being labeled as disloyal or as being a traitor. And we all are deeply worried. There's an inner child in all of us who worry about abandonment. And it actually, the fear of betrayal goes very deep in every one of us, not only in conflict zone, but every one of us. And of course, that makes it difficult for people to express any differing views. And then this, as a result, of course, creates a closed narrative loop, engaging. So that means we only engage with like-minded people and reinforce divisive narratives. So it's a closed circle, and it repeats while deepening. Pillar number 3, othering. Now, that is one of my favorite words. Not that I like othering, but I like how simple one word expressed so much. This picture I took in a refugee camp called Shatila. Shatila camp is in Beirut. It was originally built for Palestinians, but there are Syrian refugees too. It's established in 1948 for 3,000 people, and now there are 15,000 people, maybe more, living. Dire, dire, dire living conditions. I'll tell you one thing, that what you see there as spaghetti cables are, because this camp is only built for 3,000 people, and there's so many more, like 5-6 times more. People pull electricity from one neighbor to another, and there is so much problem. And it's just one of the problems that I heard some heart-wrenching statistic that in this camp, every other week, at least one person, mostly children, die when they're washing their hands because they're electrified. So it is a dire, dire situation they live in. Now, on top of the dire situation the residents live in are also subject to being dehumanized, which is my first bullet. The refugees are often depicted as burdens on society. They're viewed as less capable, and they're inferior to Lebanese citizens according to the local community. And so, of course, this creates prejudiced assumptions, very, very expectedly. So it reduces individuals to put group labels. So it's all about labeling, ignoring anyone's personal experience because we are dehumanizing them. So they're seen as lazy, criminal, inferior, etc., etc. So I will just put this, I will sprinkle the same question to you throughout the next, 5 more minutes, 7 more minutes, 6 more minutes. Do you relate to this is what I keep asking. So, and then of course, the third bullet is us versus them is what then we end up in. Now, I now told a few things about what I saw in conflict zones, and let's come to our own societies. Is this really any different? I mean, how many of us experience polarizing political elections where different viewpoints have led to fractured workplaces, fractured families, couples arguing with each other, families arguing with their parents, and identities becoming more entrenched? And how many of us have seen organizational problems? I'm working with somebody at the moment who was saying that they can't talk about where they voted in the country that they live because they're worried about being having conflicts and being labeled. So, and also I want to even ask how many of us have witnessed family conflicts which cause similar feelings. And I am not putting the war zones with our comfortable societies. I don't know where you're joining from, but I live in London. We have we're very privileged. So I'm not comparing the level of devastation, but I'm comparing. I'm not comparing, but I'm relating the psychology of the devastation, and we might be living in internally. How many of us have heard as a result of organizational issues, people having breakdowns? So some of the things that we go through in our societies, for example, post-elections, especially, we had Brexit vote here a few years ago, and oh my goodness, there were so many issues during that time within families, within organizations. And so my take on it is that it's less visible. The physical destruction is less visible, yet it can be crippling. It can be crippling. This is not a comparison. This is about relating it. Now, let me explain this a bit better. So I've been thinking about this in terms of fractality of human experience. So I'm fascinated by fractals. I looked up and the dictionary says that fractal is a shape or structure that is the same as itself at different scales. So it's infinitely deep. Each pattern made up of smaller copies of itself, and those smaller copies are made up of even smaller copies forever. For instance, from nature, if you could see, the first one is a fern and a cabbage and lungs and the rivers. So there is some fractality element to the devastation I saw. And I'm just wrapping up. At this point, I'm now going to jump onto a book by Jonathan Powell, who's a British diplomat, and he was a key negotiator in the Northern Ireland peace process. And this book changed my life. If you're going to take anything out of what I said, take this one. He talks about, he gives an account of his first-hand experiences negotiating with extremist groups. So you hear some first-hand experiences, but also he talks about what worked and what didn't work. But what really struck me and fascinated me was how he clearly distinguishes between dialogue and endorsement. So what he says is, let's listen to each other, whoever it is, whatever they have done, let's listen to each other. It doesn't mean we're endorsing. That is his message. This is Desmond actually Tutu. It's actually Blaise Pascal. It's not Blaise Pascal. It's Desmond Tutu said, if you want peace, you don't talk to your friends, you talk to your enemies. Through my experiences and traditional strategies through my experiences, I saw that some of the strategies used in organizations can be a little overly theoretical and slow to implement. So what I keep asking to myself is, if something works in these dire situations, if they can do it, can we do it? And I suspect that we can. So my message, really, just to finish it, is breaking institutionalized viewpoints is the way forward to bridge deep divisions. And if it's possible in war zones, it's possible here too. So I'll leave it there, and thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Yeshim. And let's all reflect on what we heard just now, and let's do another chatterfall and kind of put in what you're thinking. I'd love to know, in terms of Jonathan Powell, what about him and your connection with him has moved you? What changed you in terms of getting to know him as a human being?
What a lovely question. Well, a lot. I did a piece of, was privileged enough to do a piece of small work with him, and then I read his book. What moved me is I come from a very fractured family. Both sides of my parents have been subject to ethnic cleansing, which is why I live in the UK. I was brought up with so much hatred by my dad and by my mom and everyone else, and there was always other person, and they wouldn't be to be listened, and we had to be loyal to our own family and repeat what we were taught. And when this book and my work really encouraged me to get beyond that, because I just looked at him and I thought, him and Tony Blair, if they could talk, then I could, which is why I changed many years ago my career, which is 17 years ago now, 16 years ago, to become a conflict mediator. And I actually went back to my own society. My dad is Cypriot, so the project I did in Cyprus was took so much reaction from my own family. They said, how dare you go to the other side and talk to the people? But I did, and it was fascinating. I learned so much about myself, about others. Yeah, it's about self-knowledge. It's about understanding myself a bit better, and consequently, it helps my relationships, personal relationships, as well as work as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Yeshim. Hey, everybody, how about hitting enter Bing. Let's see what you all are thinking to give some thoughts there. Thanks. So let's take a breath and let's breathe that in Yeshim's good words. And Matt. And so Matt and I go way back as well. So I've had the pleasure of knowing Matt. I think maybe before we had gray hairs and things like that. I think of Matt. I think of you as the great convener. You love to convene and bring people together. And I think of ODEA, Organization Development Education Association, and getting that kicked off. Remember doing when you did that. I remember, just more recently, the gathering, OD gatherings in Baltimore, reflecting on the field and your work that came out of that. If anybody has access to the articles, I'll see if I can find it while you're talking. I'll put some of the articles you wrote into the chat so people can have some of that from you. I think that really it's your care for the field, your care for a field that matters. ODC is a field that cares about creating a better world that works for all of us, with us, for us, and by us, you know. And I think that's a great calling that I think you have done well in living up to. So I'm really glad that you're here today, Matt. Thank you for sharing today.
Thank you, Steve. It's a huge privilege. I appreciate the invitation, especially to be here with Don and Yeshim and so many good friends and colleagues and academics and students from around the world. I'm going to do something a little different today. I'm hoping you will join me in an experiment. I'm not going to give a speech. I'm not going to give a talk. I'd like to just frame a couple of concepts that are actually deeply connected to what Yeshim was talking about around fractality, and then invite you to join me in the practice of dialogue. And I'll say something about that right now. I live just outside Washington, D.C., in Annapolis, Maryland. We're still very much a company town here, watching all of the carnage in Washington and what's going on around the country and our government. And I vacillate from extreme despair, get out of the country today, to we've all got to marshal ourselves and got to do better. And I suspect I'm not the only one. So in these times of deep trouble, deeply troubling times, I think it calls for us to find a deeper level of meaning in ourselves and in our work. And I want to share with you a concept developed by David Bohm, a physicist from mostly the 20th century, about oneness. And he had some particular thoughts that I want to share with you, and then hopefully we can practice together. So here are some concepts about oneness that may help to frame our conversation. So the first one, and I'm not going to read these aloud. I want you to read them aloud to actually, let's all read them aloud to ourselves. Okay, individually, read these aloud. Microphone on, microphone off, it doesn't make any difference. But let's say these words out loud together. A human being is a part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. Albert Einstein. All differences in this world are of degree and not of kind, because oneness is the secret of everything. Swami Vivekananda. And then Rumi's famous quote, "You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop." And I saved Martin Luther King's quote as the last. Maybe we can read this together. In a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. tied in a
Tied
single
in a
garment of
garment
destiny. Whatever affects one
directly
directly affects all indirectly. So, along those same lines, physicist David Bohm was thinking about the universe. And he said, there is an order to the universe that connects all entities in the universe. Human beings, the planet, the earth, the planets, the empty space in the universe. And he calls this the implicate order. And he says that the implicate order, when we can be in touch with it, if we can be in touch with it, should guide our lives. Some call it God, being in touch with a higher order, being in touch with a higher being. Bohm says it in very physical terms, be in touch with the implicate order. So let me share with you a few things he says about this, and then we'll get right into our practice of dialogue. So to understand the implicate order, it's a deeper, hidden level of reality where everything's interconnected and enfolded together. What if we could all be plugged in and connected to each other at that deeper level? What if? Maybe we'll reach that today. The explicate order is the unfolded, manifest world we experience, where things appear separate, where our differences appear to be figural rather than what we have in common. Bohm likened it to a hologram or a fractal, where each part contains information about the whole. And his ideas suggest that consciousness, matter, and the universe arise from this deeper, unified order. So I'm going to give us a framing question, and then let me provide a little guidance for how to do dialogue. When you do Bohmian dialogue, we speak with each other, but at a much slower pace and at a much deeper level. I speak, you respond, I speak, you respond is the natural rhythm of our dialogue, of our conversation. In dialogue, someone speaks, and then there's a pause while we all experience those words and wait to see if we are moved to respond. Sometimes it's 10 seconds, sometimes it's 30 seconds. But between the end of the sentence and the beginning of your response, there is this attempt to understand the meaning and contact a greater meaning, contact a greater implicate order, if you will. It's clumsy, it's awkward, it's going to feel uncomfortable. Sometimes works better if your eyes are closed so that you're not distracted by your visual field. If anyone's on the call driving, please don't do that part of this. But I'm going to give you a framing question. I'm going to close my eyes. I encourage you to do what is comfortable for you. Sit with the question and wait, and let's just see who is moved to respond. Okay, so here's our framing question. What is your responsibility to yourself to keep active and engaged in the face of news and actions that drive us toward despair? Okay, what is your responsibility to yourself to keep active and engaged in the face of news and actions that drive us toward despair? So let that sink in, and when you feel moved to respond or have ideas or something that needs to be heard that you can connect to the implicate order, please share them.
I believe the implicate order is inherently benevolent and that it expects me as an individual manifestation, fractal manifestation of itself to bring help and hope and healing to myself and others.
Being in a state of despair, to me, is beyond being in hell. We can't get there. We cannot let ourselves reach despair as a person or as a nation or as a globe. And as Yeshim has shown us, there's a lot of people who are so deep in despair, there's no way they can return. I hate the word despair and I hate the feeling, but I know it's going to come.
Matt has told about Swami Vivekananda. The Vedantic philosophy, Indian Hindu philosophy, says that we are all tied to each other. And when David Bohm has a conversations with Jiddu Krishnamurti, he said that if real dialogue can only start when we suspend our assumptions. So when it comes to despair, I think between the despair and our helplessness, we should remember the spirit of Viktor Frankl when he was in that death knell, the will to power. I agree totally with Don that we can change the things, and the negative wiring, whatever it is there, we will change that software to a positive one. That's my responsibility to at individual level, group level, and organization level, and community also, nation state, international level.
I find great hope in the fact that since we are all connected, I do not need to fix the big problems by myself or with others. I can instead focus on those around me that I can collaborate with and co-own change with and impact and affect in a positive way toward solving those big issues.
My grandson and the world I want him to be in comes to mind for me.
The implicate order is a source of energy.
Reminded of the power of choice, that even in feelings of despair, I can make a concerted effort to choose light, to choose connection, to choose another behavior to take me to other feelings that will deepen connection with others.
It is a struggle for me to accept all beings into this implicate order, particularly as they demolish important aspects of our ecology and our society. I struggle to believe we are all part of the same fabric. Sorry for the rude interruption. That is our 15 minutes. So
Thank you,
let's-
Matt.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's detach from the implicate order and return to the explicate order.
Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome, Steve.
I appreciate that. I think I'd like to have everybody connect, Lisa, just for 3 minutes. And so if you could put them into groups and we would just go in for 3 minutes to say hi and maybe share just a little bit of something in your pairs. If we got pairs, we can do pairs, Lisa. That'd be fun if you want to do pairs. And then we'll come back in 3 minutes. So let's do that and come back with a question or a reflection. So why don't we go ahead and do that now? All righty. So let's bring us everybody here into the main screen. Let's bring us all into the main screen. That's great. So what kind of connections do you all have with each other? What are you curious about? What did you hear from the others? I'm talking to Yeshim and Don and Matt. What impacted you and what connected you, and any reflections on that?
What struck me, a through line that I saw, is that Don was talking about, you might call it the implicate order of the organization, the implicate order of Ford Motor. What is the underlying energy that drives the work there? And he spoke a lot about how one man does that, but connecting to what Yeshim was talking about around getting past othering people and the fractality of things, to David Bohm's concept of the implicate order. So I saw that as one through line from all three of our thinking.
Yeah.
on mute, Yeshim. You're on mute.
Sorry. I think what really I feel actually very touched. What touched me was I didn't know what the others were talking today, and for some reason we all started. I think we all have the same message. We all have said the same thing, like different parts of the same thing. That's quite fascinating. Yeah.
What's that same thing, Yeshim? What would you say? You all said the same thing. What is that thing?
Connecting to ourselves and to others, deeply, truly, authentically connecting to ourselves and others. All three of us, in my mind, in my heart, all of us talked about that.
I think some of the statements that were made were really elegant. As I was thinking through, they were said much better than I could express it. But basically, it makes you proud to be in the field that we're in, because we're here to help people do better, to work better, to collaborate, to care about each other, and that all makes people and organizations better. But and we have to make a choice about where we can influence things. Somebody said, you basically influence what you can. We can't necessarily change the world, but we can certainly have an impact on with the people that we're involved and engaged with, and basically to be a source of light in a very dark world.
And Don, I'll just add that those words brought tears to me. That my responsibility is to connect with other people, not to solve the world's problems. And it was just so deeply moving to me, and a release of what having the world on my shoulders, which is, of course, ridiculously messianic and stupidly self-aggrandizing, but it was a wonderful release, and thanks to whoever said that.
Yeah, it's interesting, Matt. I'd be curious about how to reflect on that, caring for the world yet letting go. There's a really good book. It's called Man, Mystic, and Monk. It's about the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
And the guy said he asked him about the levels of awareness, and the highest level is really total detachment from all outcomes, right? And the Dalai Lama said, I can't go to that level. I can't. So because I care about the world. So I'm staying at a lower level because that's he didn't say that's his work, but I kind of took it away as him saying, this is where I need to be, at this lower level. I can't be at that level. How do you reconcile that for yourself?
I think that's a good question for all of us. I did a long piece of writing this morning about the demise of our democratic press being tossed out of the White House, and the about face at MSNBC because their hosts are too controversial, and the editorial policy of the Washington Post, and ABC paying off the dictator, and Paramount thinking about paying off the dictator. And I say to myself, this is the cause for despair. And mercifully, I'm doing a lot of work in my community, which is affected by these things, but not driven by them. And so I feel like I'm in a spot where I can make a contribution and not be so demoralized. And just lovely. This experience of dialogue was deeply touching to me. Hoping it is for others too.
Yeah. So the floor is open. We don't need to manage it any more than just unmuting and coming in. And if you had a question or a reflection, I'm curious what you all were thinking about.
Are we reflecting on the whole of these presentations now?
Sure. Anywhere you want to go, Francis. Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to say something about the first presentation, and it was echoed in some of the comments. And this whole day really strikes me because I have a different filter than the way I usually listen to things. First of all, Matt, thank you for the experience. I think as adults, we still learn and shift from experience. We do. You gave us an experience, and that was very stimulating. But I wanted to go back to the story about the Ford leader and the types of things that came out of that. And they were so crisp, and they were also so familiar. And the filter I'm wearing is, how do we change on the hard things? And that came because one of our students is writing an article about diversity and inclusion. And he started it out separating it as an issue. And I looked at those points that were made about this leader and said, if those 11 points were applied to the objective and the intention of including people, how well that would work. It's not a separate issue. It's about including the value, the perspectives, the uniqueness of what people bring in the interest of business. And we don't need it to be over here as this separate entity. We need to apply it as we apply everything else. And I challenged this student to say, Dr. Katie is choosing you to be a thought leader. Right now, a thought leader would say, okay, we just cut the legs off of DEI. How can we now integrate this into doing good business? So that's the filter I've listened to through all of this today. We have so many answers. The challenge is the application.
Well, and Francis, your comment sparks for me. I had a question for you, Don. With all by the way, it's amazing for me to be in a room with two Allens and an Allen who was being talked about. I can go months and months without encountering another Allen. But he was trying to inculcate a real culture change, and apparently did. What did he do with the recalcitrants? Was he willing to be? We talk where I work about the value of the strategic hire, but also the strategic fire. That sometimes if somebody's not willing to be on board, we just have to let them go. And what do we do when our top performer is our worst offender in terms of the culture change we're trying to make?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Because I asked him about this. When you're trying to make all this culture change, what do you do with the people that don't really agree with you or aren't really embracing it? And he said, he wants to encourage open, candid dialogue as long as you do it in helpful ways rather than harmful ways. So if there's disagreement and discord or whatever, and they work together, using his term, that's okay. As you go through things, people have different perspectives and may like or dislike it. So his point was how you do things is what's really critical. And if you disagree, that's okay, as long as you do it in helpful ways, not harmful ways. So where it would come into play is where disagreement wasn't helpful. People are being demeaning to each other, working behind their backs, and so on. Those kind of issues were confronted, and he didn't, just fire somebody, but he gave them an option. Said, here are the values that we're embracing now. Are you willing to work with those? And if you're not, this is not a good place for you to be. So it's a delicate line, where you want to encourage dialogue and candidness and openness, and yet there's some line that you have to draw where it becomes destructive and disruptive.
And he was willing to draw that line.
Yeah.
So there was a similar turnaround in the early 80s with Xerox, and David Kearns had the similar challenge as Malawi. And he went from the top down, and the whole organization culture changed. He ended his conversation with, if you are skeptical, I understand. We're in uncharted ground. If you're cynical, leave.
Mm.
And I have never forgotten that.
Mm.
Yeah, I did a research study. It was published in ODR, and I interviewed 50 people that had amazing large-scale change transformations. And one of the things that came out was that one of the characteristics of highly successful, amazing change, as I titled it, was that people freely chose to leave as opposed to being forced out. But it was through the collaborative process and through the engagement where people came to the realization that it was no longer a place for them to be, and they chose to leave. And I think what I heard from you, Don, was he would say to people, hey, here's what we're doing. What can we do for you to be a part of what we're doing and how we're moving forward? He would ask them how they can be a partner of that. I consider that to be one of those difficult conversations you have that might make a person say, well, this is not the place for me. But I think it's a really interesting question. We're now at the last minute. So does anybody have a burning point, last minute thing they want to say?
Steve, I think of the impact of negative behaviors when they're harmful to others. And I imagine that at some point, a leader like Alan Mullally or someone reporting to him may have a need to explain to someone, here are the kinds of things that I've seen you do or you've done in my presence. And I need to let you know the impact of that and how that violates our principles, values, mission, etc. I would love to know about those conversations. I bet some of them happened.
Yeah, we won't have time to do that today, but Don will be back speaking again, and we'll probably do a deep dive into his work with Alan. And so I think we can do that. We'll do that later. But for everybody here, I'd love to hear your final thoughts in the chat. If you could put in just a final chat, and I'd like to ask our speakers just to, think of a final word of wisdom you'd like to leave with us. And I'll start with Yeshim, and then we can go to Matt and finish with Don. And just really would love to have you all. What's your takeaway today? What's the nugget? What's the thing you want to remember? It's a gift to our speakers today to give them a little feedback on how today landed with them. So if you could type a little something about what's your takeaway, what are you reflecting on, and so forth. But Yeshim, just leave us with what's your final parting words of wisdom you'd like to leave with us for today.
There is something, well, Francis asked a question. There were other questions, but I just wanted to pick that one. Francis asked, what are the tools that you're using in your work, she said. So there is something about life and death situations which makes solutions very pragmatic, straightforward, and actionable. And I have a a big set of tools, and I transform these into applicable into organizations. But today I didn't go in there. I'm very happy to, connect, and this is actually my work. But for me, so to guide transitions, tensions, uncertainties, etc., smoothly. But for me, what I wanted to say today was I just wanted to give a hope today that if they can do it in such dire situations, we can do it too. If they can connect, we can connect too. And there's a quote, I don't know who said this, I couldn't find out, but it's in our brokenness, not our illusions of perfection, that we connect most deeply with one another.
Thank you, Yeshim.
Thank you.
Yeah. Matt.
The forward story, what you said, Yeshim, about your work in conflict just reconfirms for me that with our practice of meditation and journaling and self-reflection and martial arts, when we focus on ourselves and tune our own instrument, we have all the resources we need to weather all of these changes.
Thanks, Matt. Hey, Don, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I would just say that I think we're really blessed to be in the field that we're in. I mean, we have been trained in skills that help bring out the best in people, teams, and organizations. And the fact that it may be difficult times, challenging times, should just give us all the more incentive to do what we've been trained to do. We can make a difference. We can have an impact on all those levels, people, teams, and organizations, and our own families.
Yep. Yep.
I'll just add one other thing here, Steve, and that is one of the compliments you paid me is called me a convener. And I think I just want to acknowledge your job in convening us here in this whole think tank session. I've been in attendance at several of them, and I would say the field has a very outstanding convener doing its work for us right now. And I just thank you, Steve.
Yeah, you're welcome, Matt. Thank you. Thanks for saying that and affirming.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I'm really grateful. This is our last think tank for the series. It was amazing. We had some wonderful people. Thank you, Lisa, for your wonderful work, and Teo and Jillian, who's here, has been supportive of my work. And thank you all for being here and being a part of this. It's been a wonderful series. We will be a little pause for a couple, 3 weeks to kind of take a breath. And we're going to be thinking about, we have a couple things that you'll be hearing from us, because we'll be doing deeper dives. We'll be doing other kinds of things coming up for the rest of this year. So more to come. And again, thank you so much. Today was a wonderful day. It's a very, very reflective day for me. So have a wonderful day, everybody, and bye for now.
Thank you, Steve.
See you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Bye.
You need some levity today. Look up Carl tells the Dalai Lama the pizza joke.
Oh, I love that joke. It was so funny. He laughed like yeah, look that up. See you all. Bye.
So bye.